The U.S. also provided them with, for the first time, anti-personnel landmines. So these are landmines that are designed to harm people as opposed to tanks. And the reason the U.S. provided Ukraine with them is because in the last several weeks, we've actually seen on the ground a change in Russian strategy where instead of leading with tanks, they're actually getting out of their vehicles and are going on foot in a lot of these frontline areas.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, in the waning days of the Biden administration, they've given Ukraine the green light. Talk a little bit about the state of play there right now.
So what you're referencing is the U.S. lifted restrictions on Ukraine's use of U.S.-provided ATACMS, which are long-range missiles. And so up until this restriction was lifted, the Ukrainians could only fire these weapons aiming at targets within Ukrainian territory or right over the border into Russian territory. And so this is an issue that Ukrainian President Zelensky has been talking about for over a year now. And it's been his argument that they're being handicapped because they're only able to hit Russian troops in the front lines. Now the restrictions have been released, and we've already seen in the first days after their policy was lifted, Ukraine firing at targets much deeper inside Russian territory. And so all of this is a big deal right now because we know President-elect Trump has said he intends to bring Ukraine and Russia to the negotiating table. So now both sides in the next 60 days or so are trying to do everything possible to improve their hands before they get to the negotiating table. So President Biden is trying his best in his final days to do everything in his power to help Ukraine in the time that they have left. And so not only does that include lifting these restrictions, but the U.S. also provided them with, for the first time, anti-personnel landmines. So these are landmines that are designed to harm people as opposed to tanks. And the reason the U.S. provided Ukraine with them is because in the last several weeks, we've actually seen on the ground a change in Russian strategy where instead of leading with tanks, they're actually getting out of their vehicles and are going on foot in a lot of these frontline areas. And so this was a change to reflect what happened on the battlefield. But it should be noted that this is something the Ukrainians have been asking for over a year now. And it took until the writing was on the wall for the end of the war for President Biden to lift these restrictions.
So the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What impact does that have on the war in Gaza, if any?
So it'll have very little impact on the war itself, but it could have more broader, wide-ranging implications. And so what we've seen over the course of the war, which has been going on for now more than a year, is an erosion of Israel's public support on the global scale. We have seen the U.S. lose some standing on the world stage because it's continued to advocate and support Israel to such a degree. And so while this won't change necessarily on the battlefield, this will continue to erode at that support for Israel. And now there are already world leaders of countries who are a party to the ICC saying that they would fulfill their obligation to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu or former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant if they were to step foot in their territory.
So closer to home, what's the latest with the nominee for Secretary of Defense in the Trump administration, Pete Hegseth?
So we've seen a couple new details come out about an incident that he was involved in 2017 involving a sexual encounter he had with a woman while they were in California at a Republican event. And so first and foremost, there was an investigation and Pete Hegseth was not charged with a crime.
Right.
That being said, the police report that we've got earlier today shows that number one, he acknowledged that there was a sexual encounter with this woman, but according to his perspective, it was consensual, and according to her, she doesn't remember much of the night, and she went to a hospital days later and filed and the nurse, not her, reported it to the police for an investigation.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.